Hi, this is Shauna, and I want to welcome you to Living in This Space. Real talk, because hey, we're all just living in this space we call life, right? It's messy, it's hard, and sometimes it's the most joyous thing we can experience. I want you, my listener, to have a place where the conversation is real and honest. I hope we can spend this time together, validating, sharing, and experiencing all the feels together with whatever topic is on the agenda for the day. Let's dive in. Okay, hi, sweet listeners, and welcome back. We are back for a very moving part 2 of a conversation that I have been having with Laura Hoddle, and we're just going to pick it up where we left off. Laura, thank you so much for continuing this conversation. And when we were talking the last time, you were just wheeling Victor into surgery.
Yes.
Y'all still may not even know fully what happened, but if you can just tell us what happened after that and, what life was like, because you had some very uncertain months there before you were able to bring him home.
Yes. Yeah. It was, you said it, that we will never really know what happened, but he was wheeled into surgery, talking about school, worried about if his high school teachers would give him enough grace to finish his assignments. And then Jay and I went to the OR waiting room, and that is, surgery is nerve wracking anyway, but when you're talking about brain surgery for a tumor, it was pretty horrific.
Mm-hmm. I would just want to interject. Victor was at Duke, which is a teaching hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So yes, it's a research and teaching hospital. So anyway, we were in the OR waiting room and literally waiting on pins and needles for any kind of feedback, and really didn't get a whole lot. Hours and hours passed, and 12 hours later, at about 7 in the evening, we finally got to speak to the brain surgeon, and she came in to the room where, they speak to the families, and said, you know what? It was really a very successful surgery. She said the tumor was still encapsulated. So no fingers had come out to attach elsewhere in the brain. She said it was attached to the brainstem. She said, but we got it. We were able to actually get the whole thing out without really impacting the brainstem, because for anybody that may not know, the brainstem is like the motherboard of the body.
Right.
So it controls everything. It does not control the thinking. It does not control your memory. It controls your swallowing. Mm-hmm. It controls your blood pressure. It controls your ability to urinate. It controls your ability to speak, to see, it's literally the motherboard of the body. And yes, there are other parts of the brain that work simultaneously with it, but that's the hub for the brain. Right. And so you can't touch the brainstem. And that's why a tumor on or near a brainstem is like extremely, extremely sensitive and scary. Yeah. Like when they say brainstem, it's scary because you basically have no hope. And, but she said, we got it. And she said, it actually came out really easily. And we were able to pull, it was encapsulated. So it had like a membrane around it. And she said, we were actually able to very, very delicately get that whole membrane off. So the tumor itself never even attached onto the brainstem. It was attached through the membrane, but we were able to peel away that membrane. She said during the surgery, so they did a very high-tech surgery at that time where it was done in an MRI operating room. So they had him under MRI while they were operating, and which is not, at that time, was not everybody could do that. Right. And even if you had the capability of doing it, it couldn't always be done. They were able to get that done for Victor. And so she said, we got it. We had all the electrodes hooked up to all the pieces of the brain to make sure that we didn't lose a part of the brain. And she said he may have lost some hearing because his hearing, one of the nerves, that wave went down for his hearing during the surgery. And she said, we won't know about the hearing until a little bit later. She said, but the tumor's gone and
Wow.
it looked good.
Yeah,
And we're like, if he needs a hearing aid, we can handle this.
absolutely.
Like and she said, but there's a problem. And we're like, okay. And she said, he won't wake up. We have done the reversals on him. We have done as many reversals at the highest dose that we can do, and he's not breathing.
Oh, Laura.
She said his heart's beating. He's alive, but he's not breathing, and we don't know why. Except every once in a while, a patient has a hard time coming out of such a major surgery. And she said, so we're going to go ahead and transfer him to the PICU. You guys can see him. You can go on up, and we're just gonna,
It's a wait and see.
wait and see thing.
Yeah.
And so, Shauna, good and well, this is where everything unfolds. Mm-hmm. And honestly, this is the part where I don't have all the words. I don't know how to express it all. And, you think about in nature when the avalanche hits and you have the initial impact of the force of the snow coming down over everything, and it blankets, but it destroys, and it keeps destroying.
Right.
I think about even like a tsunami, about how that initial wave, that initial wall of water hits and it drowns everything. Then there's the aftermath,
right,
of the water pulling back and dragging everything with it, and that's what happened.
Yeah. And that's such an incredible description of what you went through on such a small scale. I mean, what you went through is just, you can't, right?
If you're, thankfully, I've never been in an avalanche or a tsunami, but when you watch the impact and you think, oh my gosh, what if I'd been standing there on my skis and the avalanche hit? You get buried. And there's weight and there's heaviness and it destroys and it suffocates, and you can't stop it. Right. You can't get away from it. You just have to stand and face it and dig your way out. Yeah. And you dig your way out with the knowledge that you have, with the knowledge that you're learning. You dig your way out with people that help. And then sometimes you get buried again because of people who don't help, or people who are unkind, or situations that happen that should not have happened. And you're just standing there left with this empty bag when all you wanted to do was take care of your child. And so we saw Victor at 7:30, and I'll just never forget, like, his little face was so swollen from being face down as they operated through the back of the neck. But he, his eyes were closed and he was so peaceful and quiet. And then you had the ventilator shoved down his throat, and his head was bandaged, and he was just laying there lifeless. And so you think, okay, tomorrow's going to be the better day. He's going to wake up tomorrow. And Shauna, I don't remember when he woke up, but he could not move. Mm-hmm. He could not blink his eyes. He could not swallow his own saliva. We had to start suctioning him. I'm suctioning the mouth out because, when you're at the dentist and they're working on your teeth, it's pretty miserable. Well, imagine that being always.
Always, right.
Always. And nothing on his body worked. Nothing. We didn't really know that at the time. Like I said, here's this avalanche that's hit us, and we're trying to dig out. And every time we dig out, we come to a dead end.
And you had questions that were going unanswered, or probably being answered with, I don't know.
A lot of I don't know. Mm-hmm. Surgeon went on vacation because it was Christmas time. It was New Year's at this point. She had her vacation planned. She left for vacation. The other pediatric neurosurgeon took over. He never came into Victor's room. I think he walked in one time, like literally. Mm. I don't know what that was all about, but we felt like he was very disinterested, and it was kind of like, too bad, so sad. Wait to see what happens. And they started doing a lot of brain MRIs and CT scans, and his brain stem was swelling. Mm. And I don't know that they caught it in time.
Yeah.
there's powerful I can't even think of my right word, so y'all forgive me, but anti-swelling, that's not the right word, but there's a lot of powerful drugs to help with that. I don't know that was caught in time. And I just don't know. Like you already said, we don't know.
Right.
There were people that helped in the OR that came up to visit him that were very, very concerned about him. And that was kind of different. Like,
yeah.
It made me wonder, like, did something happen that made them feel worried, or were they just being compassionate, or a little bit of both? I don't know. We'll never know. But the days turned into weeks, and Victor learned how to kind of flick his eyes up for yes and flick them down for no, so we could get yes, no questions answered. Literally could not move anything, not even his toe, finger. Eventually he was able to move a finger and toe, just a wiggle. The days turned into weeks, and they wheeled him into a surgery to place a trach in his throat. And that was very hard because he had to be ventilated.
Yeah.
Even if he was alive and he was awake, he couldn't function. And I cannot imagine. And I didn't even think about this when it happened, because we were all living in the moment. We're all trying desperately, and we never left his side. And I can't imagine waking up and being Victor.
Yeah. He must have been terrified.
And so they placed a tracheotomy and a feeding tube in his stomach because he couldn't swallow, right? And he was going on no nutrition at this point. Or we had an NG tube where they were feeding him through his nose and directly into his stomach. And so they placed the feeding tube in his stomach, and then the trach, and then they had to place a shunt in his brain because his brain fluid was not adjusting, and he was suffering from hydrocephalus because we have basically non-medical terms. We basically have valves in our brain that allow our fluid, our cerebral fluid, to move freely back and forth between our spine and our brain, and so he was developing hydrocephalus, which obviously was life-threatening. So he went in for another brain surgery to implant that device. And again, no answers. These things kept happening. We finally got cleared to go to an inpatient rehab hospital. There were only 2 pediatric hospitals in the entire state that could accept someone with his level of trauma. And mind you, he did not go into surgery with trauma.
Right.
And we accepted the one that was closest to our home because one was 3 hours away, and then one was an hour and a half. And we were already living at Duke.
Mm-hmm.
This was 3 months. We were in the hospital night and day for 3 months. And Duke was about an hour and a half away from us. So we transferred to the inpatient rehab for pediatrics to Vidant Medical Center, which is near Greenville, North Carolina. And his stats went down significantly, and they did not have what he needed to care for him.
Yeah.
They literally did a return to sender, like put him back in the ambulance and sent him back.
Oh, Laura.
He was very medically unstable,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very traumatizing. And that hope of help had been dashed for us. We were so excited to get out of the hospital. Well, we were still in the hospital, but they transferred him via ambulance. We had all this hope, all this excitement that we were going to start the road to recovery, because the brain is amazing what it can do even in trauma.
Right.
But we got back to Duke and we were devastated. And I mean, like, hopeless, devastated that we were back at Duke. And we were there for another month. They had to do another brain surgery on him because the shunt was not working properly for him. So it took another month to recover. And we just sat there while he wasted away.
Right.
At that time, one of his pediatricians made an error in calculating his tube feed to feed through his stomach. And you probably remember this, Shauna. He went from being, 160 pounds, wrestler, complete strong muscle. He went down to 114 pounds.
Yeah.
Because they made a calculating error. And I sat in that hospital room night and day for 2 weeks. And the dietitian would not come and meet me. She never would come and meet with me. I finally found a way to fire her and get a new one. And when I tell you, we were met with wall after wall after wall after wall.
You were.
We were. And so we ended up spending 4 months at Duke. And then we got the opportunity to be transferred again. And it was to the other hospital that was 3 hours away. And so that's what we did. And at this point, night and day care for Victor, and during his time at Duke, would do this thing called neurostorming. And it's a normal thing when the brain is trying to readjust from trauma. And it happened every night at 2 a.m. And I sat up with him every night. Jay and I did not get sleep. We divided and conquered. He would sleep in a hotel for a night, and then he would come back the next day and give me a break. And we would do like a night, 2 nights, 3 nights on, but we never left. So we started to live all around Victor's caregiving. And we, as a couple, as a family, we were very separated because everything was about fighting for Victor and fighting for his life, and making sure that he was never alone and that he never felt abandoned. He couldn't see. That was the other thing. He was blinded by this. So he woke up with, apparently he could see for a while, and then as the brain adjusted, he lost his vision. He did get some of his vision back, thankfully, but it was extremely limited. And Jay and I we literally lived separate lives because one of us was with him at all times. And we would try to come together when the doctors would come in so we could talk together. But, we had kids at home, and I would drive back and forth to try to make sure Andrew was okay and Martin was okay. And thankfully at this point, Martin did get his driver's license. And so that helped because he could get himself to and from school, and he could help get Andrew around. But I would come home for a couple of days, and Victor was in all this neurostorming at nighttime, and we weren't sleeping, and it was devastating. And then just to watch somebody go through that, and you can't help them. And so that was all going on at Duke. And finally, they got him stabilized enough, and we could try the other hospital. And we did. And it was Levine Children's Hospital, and they had an inpatient rehab. It was very small. They could take about, maybe 8 to 10 patients at a time. And we were so excited because we're like, this is it. This is gonna be it. And I spoke at length with the doctors and the people who were bringing them in, the team, and they said, we have seen some really, really bad things, and these are some of the types of cases we have dealt with, and this is what we're going to do. We have studied Victor. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to combat this. And we were so excited to hear a game plan for the first time.
Right.
And so we got there, and we kept meeting wall after wall, Shauna, and he needed a new shunt again. And they tried to send him back to Duke. And I said, I will chain myself to my child's bed. You are not sending him back to Duke. You're going to find him a new neurosurgeon, and you're going to fix the shunt because he's not going to go through this. Right. You're not going to cut his head open every 5 minutes to fix something. You're going to put a new one in, and we're going to do it right this time. And we did. We got the best neurosurgeon. He was a former neurosurgeon from St. Jude's. And when he went in to operate on Victor the first time, because he ended up having to operate on Victor multiple times, but he indicated that in his most professional way, and again, this is Laura paraphrasing, but in his most professional way, he indicated that Victor's surgery was botched.
Oh.
He never approached that type of brain tumor that was approached.
Mm-hmm. That had to be devastating to hear.
And he said, again, Laura paraphrasing Laura's words, but basically it was mincemeat in the back of his brain where the brainstem was.
Oh.
And I'm like, we don't know my Victor. You don't know my Victor. But he was an amazing surgeon. And when I tell you that he was 110% invested in Victor, he saw Victor's spark. He saw Victor's will to live. So he hung in there with us. And Victor went through 5 months of inpatient rehab, which is unheard of. Usually they do it 2 weeks at a time.
Right.
And he had multiple surgeries, multiple issues, wall after wall after wall. But while we were there, his therapists the speech, the physical, the occupational therapist, they gave everything they had to him, and they loved him so
Mhm.
good. They just loved him well, and they loved us, and they set up a little bed for us so we could stay with Victor, and we did, and we just fought hard for those 5 months. So at this point, we're at month 9,
Oh my gosh.
day and night, never going home, and things really haven't changed that much for Victor, but he's learned to stand up. He's learned to help transfer himself in and out of a wheelchair, but he really doesn't have use of his limbs very well. But he was, I mean, you saw some of his videos of him
Mhm.
trying to work out. It was unbelievable. This child was so amazing. And he fought and he fought, and everybody fought next to him. And it's like we had this army of people that were like, we're with Victor.
Right.
And so um, it was time to discharge him. And this whole time, another thing that was going on, Shauna, with we did not have room for him in his condition in our home. And we kept thinking he was going to come home and be able to walk up the stairs to his bedroom. And there were no bedrooms downstairs in our home. We have a 4-bedroom home, and all bedrooms are upstairs.
Hmm.
So I took my life savings, and we built on a beautiful handicap suite for him so we could bring him home,
Yeah.
because they said they could not release him into our care, and they were going to have to release him into the care of like an LTAC facility. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not happening.
Right.
And so we built, I designed with a contractor. He and I designed a handicap suite that became a bedroom and family room for us. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
And so after 9 months, we brought Victor home, and he was not in great shape. But, he fought very hard to do everything he could. His senior year had begun. Martin, I haven't really talked too much about Martin, but Martin is plugging away, doing everything he can to advocate for Victor. He's talking about Victor. He's giving speeches about Victor. People were doing fundraisers to help. All this is happening. Oh, and before we got home, my husband got the phone call at month number 6 in the hospital that they were turning his job over to someone else.
Oh my goodness.
That was a whole nother layer.
Yes.
That was devastating. And because my husband truly was the bread earner, because I'm a teacher. Teachers make nothing in North Carolina, unfortunately. And Jay had a good job, but people would be like, "Oh, it's so good that Jay could retire to help Victor." No, honey, he didn't retire.
Right.
He lost his job, and but we chose it.
Mm-hmm.
As his job said, you can come back now, or we're going to have to give your job to someone else. And it was kind of like I dug my toe in the sand. Jay and I together, we dug our toe in the sand, and we're like, "Find it, take it, watch us anyway."
Right.
Like, we're drawing that line in the sand, and we're drawing it with Victor.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jay lost his job,
Mm-hmm.
and he lost his insurance. He lost everything. And that's a whole nother battle that we faced. And we had people that stood with us that helped us through all of that. And anyway, we brought Victor home. And after 9 months, the senior year had begun. And Victor, with the help of his speech therapist, had taught himself how to use his left hand to sign out letters of the alphabet. So if he wanted to watch TV, he would, and Shauna, Victor, he was very well spoken. And this came out in his signing. Instead of just signing TV with his fingers, he would sign out IWANTTOWATCH. He was spelling the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so he could hear us. Oh, that's the other thing that was crazy. Remember the surgeon said his hearing was probably gone?
I do.
That was
Yeah.
the only thing that worked on him.
Really?
That was the only. He couldn't see. He couldn't swallow. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He couldn't blink. He couldn't go to the bathroom. He had to have catheters and enemas and all kinds of things. His bowels didn't work. Nothing worked.
Yeah.
But his hearing worked. So he could hear us. And so we had lovely conversations, and he would sign out all kinds of things to us. And then, so it's September of his senior year, and he signed out, "I want to finish school." And I'm like, "What, son?" So we get his principal in, and his principal says, Victor, you have enough credits because of being AIG and taking all the AP classes and all the honors classes. You actually have enough credits to graduate. And Victor shook his head no and signed out that he wanted to finish. And he did. So their senior year, while Martin was at school like normal, finishing things out, applying for colleges, Victor was at home in bed signing out his answers to Shakespeare's Othello, to honors Spanish 3, to you name it. And so when people say, does he know what was going on around him? Absolutely, he knew what was going on. And he kept his sense of humor. He signed out funny things. He could not laugh because he could not produce sound, but he would throw his head back when we would make him laugh, and we just plugged away.
He was there, fully Victor, inside this body, trapped.
He had a body that did not work.
Right.
So we plugged away like that. And about 2 weeks before graduation, one morning we woke up and we did have some nursing care, thankfully, in-home health nursing care. We did not have nighttime support. Jay and I took turns at nighttime staying up with him all night because you have to suction his mouth. You have to suction the trach. He was not on a ventilator at first. He did come off the ventilator while in the hospital, but he still had the trach because he couldn't swallow. You have to keep the trach when they can't swallow. And he had multiple other surgeries, by the way. Other things happened. They had to do a Nissen wrap in his stomach because he was choking on his stomach acid. All these things were going on. So we stayed with him 24/7. And Jay and I took turns, and I would go to work the next day after being up, at nighttime. And we just took turns. We just did what we had to do. Yeah. And so 2 weeks from graduation comes, and Victor's graduating. And he's made great grades because he has signed out every single answer to every single thing that he had to take. And everything was done where he could hear it because he couldn't read. So we had all of his lessons on audio, and then he would sign out his answers for his grades. And the kid knew words I did not know. Like, he was spelling words that I didn't even know what they were. And not only did he spell them correctly, but he was teaching me vocabulary I did not know.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, Victor, I see you. 2 weeks away from graduation, we wake up. He won't wake up. He's alive, but he won't wake up. And we drive him to Wake Med Hospital, and his brain is filled with fluid again, and his shunt had gotten clogged. They airlifted him, and I flew with him. They airlifted us back to his hospital in Charlotte. He underwent another surgery. And while we were there, we found out that a cyst had grown in place where the tumor was.
Oh, no.
That's life-threatening. And so not only had the shunt become clogged, but they were going to have to do another surgery. So they admitted him fully and went in to another surgery to fenestrate the cyst. And we were scared. We were very scared.
I know you must have been.
We'd made all this progress, and we were scared. And anyway, I just told something out of order. I know it doesn't really matter, but bottom line, we were in the hospital, and he almost missed graduation. And the cyst actually came in the fall, but he had other bad things that happened medically. So we were in the hospital for 2 more months, and by another Red Sea parting moment, which I know is like, well, when is the Red Sea going to part for Victor, right? Because we have all these moments that are unbelievable where things happen. And Victor had worked so hard for graduation, and he had missed the senior awards. He had missed his senior year. And his insurance allowed him to leave the hospital for 24 hours. And we drove him home. We got him on stage. And you probably remember this, Shauna. And we got him on stage, and he stood up from his wheelchair, and he could not straighten his arm, but he reached his arm out as much as he could. And his principal handed him his diploma. And it was amazing because he accomplished that in the face of the most unbelievable adversity that most people would have given up. And we had to whisk him back to the hospital. So when people were celebrating and going to their graduation parties, we were going back to the hospital. And so that was the summer of 2015. And we got home for a month. And then he went to shunt failure again. Mm-hmm. And same thing, we woke up, he wouldn't wake up. But instead of driving him to Wake Med and trying to get a helicopter and all that mess, Jay and I just drove him. Yeah. We just drove him. We just drove him to the hospital in Charlotte. And that's when we found out that he had a cyst that had grown back into and where the tumor was. And we were devastated and we were terrified. And the surgeon called in back up and said, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to have to fenestrate this cyst, but I'm going to do another procedure at the same time. And we're going to open up his third ventricle and we're going to see if the cerebral fluid will flow on its own." I think Victor's a good candidate for this because his shunt keeps clogging. This is going to kill him. But if we can get him shuntless through this new procedure, we can do it. So he called in another surgeon and the two of them worked together to take out the cyst and then to do this cutting edge technology to see if he could go without that shunt. You leave the shunt in. You can't take the shunt out. You leave the shunt in, you do the surgery and see if the brain will operate around the shunt. Right. And it did. So excited. Oh my God. We were so excited. And we're like, finally, Victor's going to get victory. Right. And that was on a Thursday. And by Saturday, Victor had shut down and his body had completely swelled up. And one leg had gotten really hot and one leg had gotten really icy cold. And they were worried about blood clots and all these things. And Sunday morning, I stayed up all night with him Saturday night. And they finally took him for an abdominal CT scan because his abdomen blew up like a watermelon. Remember, he's not a GI patient. Right. He's a brain patient. And here we are in the neuro ICU again. And he was dying and they did not know why. And his intestines had turned black and literally they said had died. Mm-hmm. And I could not believe what I was hearing. I was devastated. The Sunday morning medical team came in because, there's a shift of teams. Right. 7 in the morning and 7 at night. Mm-hmm. Morning team had come in and they were like, "What has happened to our patient overnight?" And they brought in all these teams and it became life-threatening. He literally was dying right there. And they started putting in central lines and they had to put him back on the ventilator. And I remember they wheeled in the ventilator because he stopped breathing and they wheeled in the ventilator and Jay started crying and he said, not again, because we had weaned him off the ventilator. Right. We made that progress where he could breathe without being hooked up. And I was just like, what are we watching? And why are we watching this? Why is this happening? And they gave us a choice. They said, "We don't think he's going to survive regardless. And we can put him in surgery and we can see what's going on with the intestines and maybe try to help him, or we can make him comfortable in the room." And I remember I was on my hands and knees on the floor and I was like, "He's not a GI patient. Right. That cannot be it. He's been through so much. Why? I do not want him going in another surgery. Not like this." And but I couldn't say no. Yeah. I could not say no. I couldn't do it. And
he had fought so hard already.
Fought so hard. He had taught me what it was to stand and to fight and to love and to tell other people to stick it where the sun don't shine when they're not being nice. It's just, he was the epitome of love and patience and strength. And so I signed the papers to put him into surgery. And Jay and it was Sunday morning, and they don't do surgeries on Sunday morning unless it's an emergency. Mm-hmm. And so they let us walk all the way back to the final. There's multiple doors for an OR, and they let us go up to the last one. And I knew what was happening, and I leaned down and I whispered to Victor, and Victor was already kind of not there. He was not breathing. They had the ventilator and all that. They had the pulmonary team there. And I leaned down and I whispered in his ear. And I just whispered, I said, son, I love you so much. You do what you got to do. This next amount of time, we're going to take you, put you in surgery again, and you and God decide what you want to decide, sweet son. And nobody heard me. Like I said, I whispered in his ear. I wanted to let him know it was okay if he needed to give up, if his body was too tired. And Jay grabbed his hand and said, "See you soon, son." And they wheeled him off, and we went to the OR waiting room, and there was no one there because it was Sunday. And I'm just like literally rocking back and forth, just in trauma. You're just living in trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I made a Facebook post to say, we don't know what's happening, but we may be losing our Victor. And Jay was just sitting there quietly. And then all of a sudden, Jay looked at me and he said, "Wait a minute, did they say that he was going to die?" And I said, "Yeah, honey, they did." And this wailing came out of him. And because he just didn't, Jay is always so positive and optimistic that he didn't even hear what was going on in the room.
Right.
He just didn't hear it. I don't think he could hear it. And so he collapsed on me, and I just held him in my lap, and he wailed. And then all of a sudden, the cavalry showed up. Some friends that we had met in Charlotte that had been following Victor's story, showed up with lunch for us. And so we sat there and just ate. Tried to. You can't really eat, but and they just sat with us. And all of a sudden, the OR team comes walking in, and it's the GI specialist that was on call that day. And then it was the neurosurgeon that was the partner to our neurosurgeon. They tag teamed together. So we knew this neurosurgeon because he had tag teamed on Victor before. And he comes walking in because protocol, when you have a neuro patient, a neurosurgeon has to be present for some of the procedures that take place. They came in. And they had their scrubs on and their masks covering their faces, and they pulled their masks off, and the biggest smiles were there. And I said, "What is happening?" And they said, "We've never seen anything like this." We opened up his abdomen, and as soon as we freed the intestines, they pinked back up to life.
Oh, praise God.
I was like, "Wait, what?" Because we were told they were black and dead, and they were like, "Not looking good." They were dead. There's a couple of spots that we're not so sure about, but his intestines came back to life, and his fascia, which is that fatty stuff up under your skin, his fascia had perforated like a fishing net, had all these little holes in it. That's not supposed to happen. They do not know how it happened. To this day, we have no idea how his fascia torn. But his fascia had torn, and his intestines had worked its way up in the little holes and had twisted themselves off.
Right.
When they cut, it was like a fishing net cutting a fish free. It came back to life. And they had to take the shunt tubing from his brain out because it went into his abdomen, and they were fearful of meningitis setting in as he was septic. He had gone septic.
Yeah.
And so the neurosurgeon removed the tubing, but if you remember, he had the fenestration and the third ventricle opened up. So that had already happened. And they said, we're gonna see, we're gonna continue to see from a neurological standpoint if things keep operating the way they're supposed to. And we weren't going to know. But they had to remove that shunt tubing, which would not impact that previous surgery. That was neither here nor there. They did that to protect the track from the abdomen up to the brain. And so that was that. Victor started to recover, and he started to move his hands. He started to shake his head and all these amazing things. And then the next week, Tuesday hit, and he shut down. And meningitis had settled into his brain from the abdominal surgery. And he had to go into another life-threatening situation. And they they had to take the shunt and everything out. They had to take it all out because of the meningitis. And they literally did a brain wash and rinsed his brain, took all the hardware out. And then it was a wait and see game. And unfortunately, the meningitis, the bacteria closed off that third ventricle.
Mm-hmm.
And it ruined that successful surgery for him. Mm-hmm. So they had to keep his brain open with a tube to allow it to drain. And we were going to have to put a new shunt in. We're going to have to start all over again. And so they did. Victor at this point was not doing well because he had meningitis now in his brain, bacterial meningitis from sepsis. And he was not moving. He was nothing, just nothing. And so he was just on the ventilator laying in the hospital. So that happened, and they put the new shunt in. And they left the external drain because you have to do that. You have to allow for time to pass. And when they pulled the external drain, they nicked a blood vessel, and he had a brain bleed. And it bled into his third ventricle. They had to go in and drain the blood out. So we had another brain surgery. So we hit wall after wall. And at this point, he was a little bit too old to go back into the pediatric unit, where we knew all the therapists, and they wanted him so badly. They wanted him back because they loved him so much, and they wanted him to see victory. You know, I think of Victor, and I think of victory, and I'll never see that differently now. And
Right.
Insurance wouldn't allow it. He had to go to an adult unit. And we got to the adult unit. And at this point, we're in December of 2015. So we've spent months and months in the hospital again. And the adult rehab doctor behind our back said that Victor's quality of life was basically not of value, and that he did not agree with sending him back to our home, and that he would not send him back to our home, but he was going to send him away to an LTAC. And the closest one that would accept a patient in his condition was in Asheville, which is 5 hours from where we live. And I reached out to the Brain Tumor Foundation for help. And I said, I need help advocating for my son. And she came and met with me. And I wrote, I don't know, 5-page letter. I don't know. I wrote, I love to write. So I put my words to power on the paper. And I told that surgeon what I thought of his policy. And so now it's Christmas time. He comes to see me. He had never set foot in Victor's room making all these decisions. Mm-hmm. He comes to see me and says to me, what makes you think that Victor will ever have any kind of recovery for life? And I said, what makes you think you know my Victor? Mm. And he had a very smug look on his face. And he just got up and walked away, never came back in. And that afternoon, with assistance, Victor stood with his team of support, with a ventilator dangling from his throat, with unable to open his eyes. He stood, and he did sign out that he wanted to stand. So I don't know if he heard that doctor. I'm sure he did, because he could hear everything.
I bet he did.
And so we stayed in the hospital, and that was a total of 16 months. And we came home, and he was in really bad shape. He was still on the ventilator. And so that was February of 2016. And we just continued to climb this uphill battle. Eventually, insurance said that therapy wasn't worth it for him. So we bought a little in-home gym, and we would sit him at the gym, and he would exercise his legs, and we would help him exercise his arms. And, we just did life.
Yeah, you did.
Life, and that was life. And Jay continued to stay at home with him. I started working at one point. I think I had 5 jobs, literally. I worked on weekends at a jewelry store. I started a small business. I selling skincare. I did all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And to just keep Victor home. It was like Operation Keep Victor Home. We tried all kinds of medical treatments, and We bought him a van to transport him back and forth to things. And we just did life. And in the meantime, Martin was living without his twin. And I got to give him a shout out because he applied to colleges on his own. Martin got a full ride to UNC Chapel Hill.
Wow.
And he did it by himself. And he did it in the wake of massive tragedy and adversity and the naysayers. You know, he did it. He did it all.
Yeah.
And he went and he graduated. And Victor was dreaming of going to college and would sign out that he wanted to go to. And Jay and I were so exhausted. We didn't even know how to make that happen. We were literally living zombies every single day. It continued for 9 years.
Oh, Laura, over the years, I've watched you and your precious family through social media, and I have been completely in awe of you and Jay. The faith that you have shown, the strength that you have shown, and I know it wasn't easy. I can't even imagine where you were pulling from. I know your faith is key here. But here is Victor fighting and fighting, and he could have given up so many times. And we know the science of that. We can give up when we're ready. And he wasn't ready. He had something else to say to the world. And I know his heart just from what I know of Victor. He always wanted everybody to see the Lord and love the Lord like he did.
He used to sign out when we were even at Walmart and stuff because we would take him for outings and people would stare at him because he looked, I mean, his body was atrophying in front of him. Even though we did everything we could do, he could not move his mouth. So his jaw hung open. All the facial muscles were atrophied. And he had to have all 4 wisdom teeth taken out in the middle of all of this, you know, and because the crowding was so bad and the roots were growing into other teeth. And we all know that you can get impacted and get infected and have abscesses. And so he had all this stuff going. And no matter who he met, it was just amazing. And I'm like, I was so sheepish about everything. He was so bold, and he would encourage people. He would sign out things to encourage them. And he had a little bit of vision, and he might say, I like your dress, or you look pretty today. How he had the strength in him to even care to do that. And he gave the best hugs, and he would invite people to church every time we would go to physical therapy while insurance supported that until they stopped. He would invite all of his therapists to church. Like, he would sign out, do you have a church? Please join me for church. And he had something special going on in him. I feel like God had to speak something into him to say, hang on, son.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just hang on through this. I've got to just hang on. And because Victor was teaching people. He was teaching people. He was teaching me. He was teaching Jay. And Jay was a powerhouse. He did everything to make sure that Victor was at the men's group on Tuesday night and Bible study on Wednesday night and prayer group on Thursday, whatever. Like Jay was Victor's hands and feet. And Jay would sit at nighttime and read to him and read scripture to him or read a book to him but Victor always had requests. And Jay made that happen. And, so that's just where we lived. And Martin was, you know, going to college and graduated. And it was beautiful and sad when Martin walked across that stage and Victor was sitting in the wheelchair. You know, and Andrew's there the whole time cheering everybody on. And just, you know, Andrew and Martin had gotten so close. And Martin was battling a lot of demons, and Martin and Victor both had, and Victor would tell us through his signing, but Martin would tell us too, they both had severe nightmares, night sweat, traumas, terrors of her, the former mother, hitting them, slapping them. Victor at one point in the middle of the day and was signing out. He was trying to pull his trach out one day. He got completely discombobulated, and he signed out that she was in the room. And she wasn't. But she was in the room, that she was pointing at him and laughing at him. Just pure evil. And he tried to pull his trach out. And you know, we were just going through all these things. And I kept asking Martin, please go to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
please, son, go to counseling. We even took Victor to counseling and we had to translate everything he was
Yeah.
saying. Exhausting. And the counselor had no clue what to do. I don't blame him at all. Who does? There's
Right.
no manual for what happened. And but we were trying so hard. I would go and sit in the parking lot of where Jay would take him to counseling a lot of times while I was still at school. And then I would leave school and go and sit in the parking lot and just wait.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, do you need me? Do you not need me? Would it be bad if I walked in? Because it was so delicate.
Right.
And Martin was struggling with all kinds of things. And it was getting exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
But we kept waiting for the moment where something good
Mm-hmm.
would
Right.
because it can. Good moments can happen in the middle of trauma. And that's what we were hanging on to
Yeah.
in the fear and the anger and the anxiety and the sadness and the feeling defeated every day.
Mm-hmm.
Getting up every morning, feeling defeated, getting up and going to work and having to push that defeat away and do what you got to do. Going to church, feeling defeated with people around you, some of them loving you, some of them gossiping about you. We had so many people helping us, but you still were walking in this feeling of defeat, but trying not to,
Absolutely.
trying not, trying not to look at the
Mm-hmm.
reality in front of you and have the hope and honestly, it was Victor's love.
Mm-hmm.
It was Victor's love that allowed us to walk even in the face of all of this defeat and not be defeated.
Because how could you quit?
Yeah.
Victor was not quitting. He was still moving forward. We could talk for hours about the next few years or years that you lived like this. And I clearly remember you would have these amazing moments that you would celebrate. And then you would have moments where you were calling on, you had thousands of followers, thousands of people following this story. I want to ask you, because I know there are people listening who may have an opportunity to support someone that they know going through a tragic situation. There's always good and bad when you've got so many people in your life
Yeah.
that are watching you. And like you said, you had naysayers and you had supporters. And I know we could talk about the negative side, but we won't do that. What I want you to do is to I just want you to speak to the people listening. What was so valuable to you and Jay and Martin and Victor and Andrew while you were going through this? What were people doing that was right?
That's a great question. And so it's hard to say what's right without also addressing what's wrong, because a lot of people say and do things like, well, I know how it feels, or have you done this? Have you tried this? And they try to give you suggestions to
Mm-hmm.
don't do that, because Jay and I were 100% invested. And if someone knows someone that can help, like, hey, I know a cutting edge doctor and I'm friends with him and I'm going to reach out to him, that's fantastic. Do things like that. Now, we didn't have that situation, but I'll tell you what we did have. We had a community within our community, and we called it our hashtag Team Victor community. Martin actually designed all of that. He designed this Team Victor, and that's kind of what his platform was. And that we literally had people that would say, we're going to bring you dinner because you're in this for the long haul. And you shouldn't have to worry about making dinner every night. We're going to bring you dinner. And we had people bringing us dinner for a long time,
Yeah.
like 2 or 3 nights a week. You know what? We didn't even get to eat as a family. We did not celebrate around food. We had a child that could not eat. For somebody to walk in and say, we got you Applebee's. We got you steaks tonight. Like, oh my word. Like, that was Christmas to us.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that. Like, if you just show up.
Yeah.
Don't say, let me know if you need something. People do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been guilty of that. Because I'm going to tell you what, nobody's going to tell you what they need. And sometimes they don't know what they need.
Right.
Sometimes Ray and we were so overwhelmed and so exhausted. Like, come do my laundry for me.
Mm-hmm.
Come clean my bathroom for me. But honestly, nobody could walk through what we were walking through. Nobody could help with Victor. Nobody could, babysit Victor. And I use that word babysitting because Victor's care was so tedious and so medical that we could not have somebody just come and sit with him because you would have to know how to operate medical equipment. So somebody showing up and saying, I can bring you dinner. And there's no judgment here.
Yeah.
We're not going to ask you to do anything in return. We're just going to bring you dinner. And that honestly was amazing. We had somebody one time go to Fresh Market, which we never shop at Fresh Market, but they brought us a bag of groceries of fun stuff.
Oh, love that.
Beef pot pie that was so delicious. It was unbelievable. I'd never had a beef pot pie from Fresh Market. It was amazing. And like, I remember that years later because that was how special that was.
Yeah.
And people would give us gift cards for gas when we were driving. Like I was driving back and forth to the hospital and working and taking care of children. And people would say, I'm giving you a $50 gas card. Thank you. Like those are the things without judgment, without remarks. If you want to help.
Right.
Be transparent about it and help.
Yeah.
Don't. But don't have opinions and don't have gossip and either get in the boat with the person or stay out.
So important. And I'm so glad you said that. There are so many things that people will say in that moment. Like you said, I know how you feel. No, you don't. I know that some people, it's God's hand, or, they just got all of these things. I know you probably heard all of this and more.
Oh, what did you pray wrong? I actually had somebody say this to me. Laura, you clearly did not pray the right prayer. You had the wording wrong, or this wouldn't have happened to Victor. And you're already reeling in devastation for watching a child suffer. And then somebody wants to say that to you.
Yes.
And then I'm like, you clearly didn't read the New Testament.
Yes, absolutely.
You clearly don't know who Jesus is. And you clearly also don't know that we do live in a really messed up world. But we have grace. We have grace and we have love. And if you can't operate in that, keep your mouth closed.
Exactly. So listeners, as you're listening to this, just take this in, because you may come across someone in your life and you've heard these things that are so devastating to hear when you're on the other end of it. And then for those of you who may be walking a tragic journey right now, and this is very familiar to you, I want to encourage you to set some boundaries in place, because there are going to be people you are going to have to just shut the door to, right? Put some boundaries in place.
That is a big piece of advice. And we had some amazing people help us. And Jay and I never asked for anything. And honestly, we didn't have to, because people were lined up to help us. And I will always be thankful for my Team Victor community. And unfortunately, there were people that did not have good intentions, and we did not know it at the time. And we just accepted all help, thinking, oh, they'll handle it. Things were set in motion while we were in the hospital with Victor. We weren't even here for some of the things that were set in motion. And we were so, so thankful. But there were things that happened. So yes, I would definitely tell people, if you find yourself in a situation, do some vetting before you think that everybody is there for the right reason.
Right.
Do some vetting. And there are so many people that are amazing. And we have a ton of people that are amazing. And we will always be thankful. But they were thing is, like, they were there for Victor.
Yeah.
And they have to be okay with that. And we're so thankful for that.
I'm so thankful that you had the support that you had.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had so many amazing people, and we still do.
Well, what an incredible opportunity that you gave these boys. And while you're struggling and navigating this horrific situation with many ups and downs with Victor, here's Martin and Andrew. And I do think there is something behind twins. And they were very close. I know they had their moments, but there's still a bond between twins. So can you share with us a little bit about Martin? And I know that, I know he graduated, he went to college, he found love, it was such a joy to see him moving on like that.
Martin was having to learn to live his best life without his twin. And and he was doing a great job. And everything Martin did, he did it fast.
He did.
Everything he did with speed. And if he wanted to accomplish something, he would accomplish it in 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just how he operated. And so he's moving at this light speed as he's going through college and going into, he gets accepted into the master's program at University of Chapel Hill. He gets engaged to this beautiful, beautiful young lady. And then Jay and I are seeing some things that were not healthy, but he's going full steam ahead. And Jay and I even talked to a couple of people who were involved in some of the unhealthy habits that were happening, asking them, we're concerned about Martin. We're trying to parent him, but he's full grown, and we're in 24-hour caregiving with his twin, who cannot even hold his head up hardly, but who's still alive, who's still with us, who wants to be he wants to be in life. He wants to be involved. And so, we were concerned about Martin, and Martin was beginning to have some high highs and low lows. And we didn't know all of it because, again, he's an adult and he's hiding things. And, but he meets our beautiful daughter-in-law, who is one of the kindest and one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. And I remember when they were dating, when they got engaged, people would say, well, do you like her? Do you want him to marry her? People are like that. And I mean, not everyone, but some are. And so I got a lot of questions. Well, do you really like her? What do you really think? And my answer was always this: Martin has a lot of trauma. Martin has not healed from his trauma. I am afraid that he's going to hurt her in a way that cannot be undone. Mm-hmm. And those were my words. Yeah. And because I was worried. Mm-hmm. I was worried about his stability of having to he'd been abused his whole life, never got counseling, always told me he was fine, but he's having these night terrors, and he's trying to do everything on his own. And he's so smart. He's so funny, and he wants to be successful. So they get, he and my daughter-in-law, they get married. And then all of a sudden, surprise, here comes the baby. I think they've been married for maybe about 6 months. And they're living here in town, just bought a house. And again, I don't know, Shauna, if you have something to add to Martin. I know you know where my mind is already going and what I'm trying to for. But Martin was doing all the things.
Yes.
But he was also hiding all the things. And Jay and I were afraid. We were seeing things that we were afraid of. But he was married. He was now a father. And one afternoon I was at school. It was in May. It was May 12th, 2022. And me and Christy got married in 2020, and the baby was born. And then here comes May of 2022. And I'm at school. I'm at work.
Okay, so I just have to stop right here and let you know that our internet connection was very unstable as we were wrapping up episode 2. So we are going to come back in episode 3 and pick up the conversation with Laura about the phone call that she was about to get. Until we talk again, I hope you are living in your best space. Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit follow wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, I hope you live in your space well, my friends.